Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Business. I'm Priyanshi Sharma, and in this segment we'll get you the top news stories from the world of business, finance and our economy at large. Well, first let's start with how the markets performed today. Indian equity benchmarks swung between gains and losses through the day to end lower in the end. While private banks and non-banking financial companies declined, realty and pharma were the top sectoral gainers. My colleague Alex Matthew joins us from the BQ Prime newsroom with a wrap of all the market action.
So it was a bit of a lackluster session for the benchmark index, the Nifty 50 ending with cuts of about 0.25% and ending in fact lower than the 18,500 mark. It traded in a range of about 110, 120 points or thereabouts. And you saw quite a bit of selling towards the end of the session. For the most part, though, it had stayed very close to its previous close. The broader markets, in fact, outperformed the benchmark index. So while the mid-cap index ended with gains of about 0.1%, the real outperformer was towards the broadest end of the market, where the small-cap index gained about 1% or so. The sectoral picture will tell you more. You had the likes of realty, healthcare, pharma, and media lead gains as sectors. But you had the Nifty bank and the financial pack that underperformed. The banking index was lower by as much as 0.8%. Now moving to the key movers on the benchmark Nifty, you had Apollo Hospitals that led the gains up as much as 4%. You had Divi's Laboratories from the pharma pack gain about 2.4% as well. And then you had a couple of auto names. You had Tata Motors end with gains of about 1.7% and Bajaj Auto also registering just about that amount of gains. By and large, the auto sales data that we've seen today has been positive, with most major automakers registering positive dispatches for the month gone by. You had a few outliers in the form of Atul Auto, for example, that underperformed, and that was reflected in the stock price. But among the losers on the Nifty 50, you had Coal India, that was the worst performer, losing about 4.4%. That's understandable given that the government is looking to sell about 3% stake in the company, and the floor price of the OFS or offer for sale was at 7% discount to yesterday's closing price. Kotak Mahindra Bank was a big underperformer today. No real trigger, but it has gained ground in the recent past. It ended with cuts of about 4%. Now, a host of other stocks hit 52-week highs, and that's where you see a bit of a dichotomy where a few smaller stocks gained ground while the larger peers were underperforming. The likes of 3M, Birla Corp, Bharat Dynamics, Canfin Homes, as well as CRISIL and Delta Corp, among a list of as many as 35 stocks, hit their 52-week highs today. But more or less par for the course. We'll have to see whether or not those key levels for the benchmark index are defended. That 18,500 mark has been broken, at least for the near term. We're likely to see a little bit of profit booking because of the kind of run-up we've seen for the benchmark index.
And while we're on the subject of markets veteran Ajay Srivastav spoke to BQ Prime's Neeraj Shah, where he shared his view on investing in Indian IT. The MD of Dimensions Consulting was bullish about the IT pack going ahead. Listen in.
What worked best for us over so many years is buying good companies when they're all trashed by the market. Nothing gone wrong in the company. Yes, there is a macroeconomic issue. Yes, there is a demand issue in the US and so on and so forth. Yes, there is. But also what is happening at the end is that you can't replace these companies. They're global size companies. One. Number two is most important. As technology changes, they're going to become more efficient. People said chat GPT. I think they'll become more efficient. They'll don't need to employ those millions of people from the campuses and bring them up the curve and so on and so forth. So their model will change. The key point is they have no leverage, strong cash flows. They've got long-term contracts. They can't be replaced. At the end of the day, only 5 companies or 6 companies in the world who can do global level contracts. There are not more than 5, 6 companies in the world needed. Can you believe it? Right? So, and you can't recreate if I want to give a large project to a company, I can't go to a startup and say, do my project for me. I need to go to somebody established. So to that extent, disruption can happen, but disruption will happen in their favor. And I keep saying, when everybody says the sector is gone, dead, and the companies are good, it's a global demand is going to come back to you by those sectors.
And moving on, auto sales in May were a mixed bag, with passenger vehicles and two-wheelers thriving. Commercial vehicle and tractor sales were muted. My colleague Hiral Dadia joins us for more from the BQ Prime newsroom. And Hiral, take us through those numbers.
The month of May has actually witnessed a positive sentiment from a consumption perspective. Clearly, if you see the passenger vehicle sales have been good for the companies that have reported the sales numbers so far. Tractor sales is expected to remain flat and lower, and that's what the numbers are indicating. Let's quickly look at Maruti Suzuki year-on-year and YTD. We've seen a growth in terms of the total PV as well as the CV sales. However, the total exports have declined marginally. Now, it's mainly the SUV sales that have given a boost to Maruti, and Maruti has seen the highest sales number in the last 31 months. So clearly the sales of SUV has offset the weakness that the company could have seen in terms of the hatchback segment. Moving on, if you talk in terms of Hyundai as well, the dispatches have risen, and that has been mainly driven by the flagship SUV, that is Creta, as well as the Venue. In terms of M&M, if you talk about the monthly numbers, a 14% growth is what we've seen, and it's the passenger vehicle segment that has seen growth, whereas the tractor sales has seen a dip this time around. In fact, the management has clearly indicated that the sales volume for both SUV and pickups was restricted by a short-term disruption with regards to where engine-related parts at the supplier end goes, and the semiconductor supply constraints on specific parts have also continued during the month. In fact, the fall in the tractor sales was pretty much in line with what the analysts were estimating. Coming to the two-wheeler space, you had a Bajaj Auto that reported a significant increase in the overall sales in the month of May, and the domestic sales of both two-wheelers as well as CV saw almost doubled, in fact. Now, this was aided by a low base from last year, with chip shortages had hit production as well as sales. Coming to Escorts Kubota, the dispatches have grown 9%, and they've clearly beat street estimates because the expectation was slightly lower, and the expectation predicted a fall of around 4.4% in the sales. Moving on, if you see in terms of Eicher Motors, the CV arm sales has seen a growth of around 11 to 12% coming in there. And very lastly, Ashok Leyland has been an interesting one because the expectation was a 24% growth in terms of the overall sales, whereas the sales has fallen by 1%. So again, a big gap coming in versus in terms of the actual number as well as the expectation. So overall, the scenario seems to be pretty okay. It's the tractors which has seen weakness. PV is seeming pretty strong. Two-wheelers is also pretty strong with the companies that have reported the May numbers so far. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Hiral, for that. And meanwhile, Mahindra & Mahindra's ED and CEO Rajesh Jejurikar says that rural sentiments are positive as price realizations of finished crop has shown improvement. Speaking to my colleague Sajith Manghat, the M&M top boss says that he expects low single-digit growth for tractors in financial year 2024. Listen in.
This is what's called terms of trade for farmers. So, what's the input price, what's the output price, and that's been under a bit of pressure with all the input inflation. But we see that improving over the last few months, where the price realizations on finished crops has improved. Mandi prices have moved up somewhat, so terms of trade to the farmer are improving as well. So that's the second enabling factor. The third is, of course, then, how good was the previous crop. Right now the Rabi crop is looking good. How good is going to be the sowing, and how good is the sowing is also linked to the sentiment around rain. So rains does play a role. Reservoir levels are important. So if reservoir levels are good and rains are not so good, then we could expect still a positive.
So how do you look at the growth going into FY24? Do you see the same kind of growth rate? And what I saw was that the raw material prices hasn't softened much for the tractor segment at least. So how do you see that growth coming in for FY24?
Yeah, first is your tractor industry growth we expect to be in low single digits. The reason for that is, it's F23 has been a pretty good year with a good industry growth of about 12%, we grew 15%, we gained market share. So it's been a good year. And it's a high base now, so 940,000 odd industry. So on that base, we expect a low single digit at this point of time, but one never knows. We will wait and see how many things play out, like I just explained, the multiple levers.
And moving on, as Digital India moves forward, UPI transactions jumped over 58% year-on-year in the month of May, making it the highest volume and value ever recorded. Data suggests over 941 crore transactions were made, amounting to over 14 lakh crore rupees. The transaction value for the same period climbed by 37% compared to last year. Remember, UPI is one of the globally accepted payment systems and has emerged as a trusted source during the pandemic. The data also shows that India's homegrown payment system has processed over 83 billion transactions in financial year 2023, with a mounting total value of 139 lakh crore rupees. So a major progress there being seen for UPI. But moving on to the other big story, quick commerce company Zepto is all ready to head to the Dalal Street soon. The startup is planning for an IPO in the next 2 to 3 years. The company has also elevated several key executives in the wake of the IPO. Rishabh Bhatnagar joins us with all the details.
Well, yes, Zepto, the startup that rose to popularity for its 10-minute delivery service, today said that it is looking to be a profitable public company in the next 2 to 3 years. So on the road to an IPO, Zepto has also announced that it is elevating certain key executives to senior positions. Chief Operating Officer Vinay Dhanani is being elevated to President of Supply Chain and Category. Vikas Sharma is being elevated from Senior Vice President of Operations to Chief Operating Officer. And Viral Jhaveri will be taking over as Chief Growth Officer from Amritanshu Nanda, who is resigning from the startup. The startup has also said that it has multiplied its business fourfold in the last 12 months and turned dozens of dark stores fully profitable. Now, Zepto's rise as one of the country's leading quick commerce startups has been noteworthy. It was founded in 2021 by Stanford University dropouts, and it rose to a $900 million valuation within 9 months. So yes, Zepto is another startup to be keenly followed as it heads to the public markets.
And the GST collection figures for the month of May are now out, and 1,57,000 crore rupees worth of gross GST revenue has been collected by the government for the month of May 2023. And year on year, that's a growth of around 12%. To get details on these numbers, we have my colleague Janani joining us for more details. And Janani, though it's a 12% growth year on year, it is lower than the GST collection last month when it was around 1.87 lakh crore rupees. So take us through the trend that we're seeing and also the breakup of the GST figures.
That's right, Priyanshi. As we know, the gross GST collection figures for May, this is for transactions in April, came in at 1,57,090 crore to be precise. As you pointed out, these are lower than what we saw in the previous month, which was actually for transactions in March, which clearly means it's benefiting from the fiscal ending boom. As you mentioned, there's a 12% year-on-year growth, and interestingly, from domestic transactions, there's been 11% growth. Let's try to break this down exactly. Central GST this time has come in at 28,411 crore. State GST has come in at 35,828 crore. Integrated GST, 81,336 crore. Cess at 11,489 crore. Now, these collections, while they are lower than the last time, actually pertain to supply transactions. It would be incorrect to see it in conjunction with what was last month, but in connection with the RBI's projected growth rate for the next fiscal. Remember, this is the first month's collection in FY24. So in conjunction with a 6.5% growth rate, this augurs really well for GST collections in this year. So in absolute terms, it is not exactly what we would like it to be. But if we look back in trends, in January, the department recorded 1.49 lakh crore. In February, it jumped much higher to 1.60 lakh crore. And March, like I'd mentioned previously, came at 1.87 lakh crore. So far, the GST collections have been staying steadily above 1.4 lakh crore, and this is the 5th time since the inception of GST that this figure is over 1.5 lakh crore. We'll have to see how the rest of the year pans out, but this is a good start.
Definitely, Janani. Thanks very much for breaking down those numbers for us. So this is good news coming in from GST, but if you compare it with last month, it is a fall in the GST revenue. But for now, moving on to the other big story of the day, Elon Musk, the billionaire, has been crowned the world's richest person again. He surpassed luxury tycoon Bernard Arnault, and as per Bloomberg Billionaires Index, the Tesla CEO reclaimed the title just in the nick of time after the shares of Louis Vuitton tumbled on Wednesday. Remember, the two billionaires have been neck and neck for the top spot in the Billionaires Index this year. And talking about numbers, data shows that Elon Musk's fortune is now valued about at 192 billion US dollars, that whopping amount. Meanwhile, Arnault gets the second place with a valuation of about $186.6 billion. The others in the billionaire club include tech tycoons like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates and Larry Ellison. And that's all we have for you in this segment of Let's Talk Business. Do tune in every weekday at 5:30 p.m. to catch the latest business news. Thanks very much for watching.